If you're a woman in your 30s wanting to drop body fat, then listen up. It's been just over a week, today's day 10, since I started a 6-week fat loss body recomp phase. Go and watch last week's video if you want to know the whys, the whats, and all that. But I'm sharing a week-by-week update of how it's going, how I'm feeling, so that you can learn some things along the way. Because getting in great shape has been overcomplicated that so many women I speak to do not have a clue what they should be doing. And it doesn't need to be like that. If you're new here, I'm Rachel, an online coach helping women get fit, strong, and build a body they're proud of so that they can look and feel better in their 30s and 40s than they ever did in their 20s. So let's get stuck in. So on day 1, I was 70.5 kilos. Now, my weight has fluctuated between 70 and 71 for a long time. It kind of sits in a range, and like I always say with clients is don't be so fixated on the number. We're looking at what the average is. But it had been around that number for about a week, give or take. After a week, I was down at 69.6, so 0.9 of a kilo. And today, day 10, I am 69.2. So things are moving in the right direction in that sense. And that is probably because I have had a really consistent week. So I've hit all my targets. So I shared this on my Instagram stories yesterday morning. I did this as a way of visually being able to see me working through the 6 weeks. It's something tangible that I can tick at the end of every day that I have done another day. And for me, that's been really important. And you can take something from this, that even if you go week by week, that you are physically ticking something. You can see it. You can see how many days you've got left. You can see the days that you've been successful. I also listed the things that I am doing daily. So I am first and foremost making sure that I'm hitting my calories, and then aiming to be as accurate as I can be with my macronutrients. Sometimes some of them move slightly, but I've really tried to stick to that as accurate as possible. I have a non-negotiable of 10,000 steps a day, so that happens regardless. But I'm aiming where I can to do more than that, sort of 12 plus. Sort of 12, 13 has been the kind of average, but I've had a few days that have been just over 10. Because that has been the bare minimum I've set for myself. So if I do that, great, but where I can, I'm striving to do a little bit more. I'm also aiming to get all my sessions done, which generally isn't a difficult thing for me because I do love training so much, and drinking at least 3 litres of water a day, and prioritising my sleep, rest and recovery, because this is the part that's so often missed when it comes to fat loss. You will have a much better outcome if you look after your sleep, your recovery. And that's not because of some weird like balancing your hormones, reducing your cortisol levels and your belly fat dropping. It's because it makes it so much easier to adhere to all the other things. Your body is in a primed position to respond, and you're not going to have the same energy crashes, the same cravings for sugar, etc., etc. So now something I talk about openly and have the conversations with clients so often is that we shouldn't be aiming for perfection, and we shouldn't be aiming for things to be 100%, because that is not realistic. That being said, this first week, this first 9 days for me, I have been so consistent. And I'm not going to use the word perfect because nothing is ever perfect, but I haven't had a problem sticking to what I said I was going to do. And I manufactured it that way. Because I know the reality is 6 weeks, there's probably going to be some days where something is going to slip, something's got to give, something will happen, and that's okay. But I wanted to make sure that I had a really successful first 7 days going into this from a mental perspective as well, of you can do this. This is how you're going to do it. Make it as easy as possible for yourself so that you can stick to what you're asking of yourself and build the evidence that you can do it. So it wasn't that I was aiming for perfection or to have 100% success rate for the first week, but I wanted to make it as easy as possible for me to do everything I needed to see the success and feel the benefit of that. And what that looked like is obviously the physical things of writing things down in terms of my targets. And one of the big things I talk to clients about is planning your training into your week. I don't really have to think about that, but I've used that, how I map out my training and what that looks like across the week, to do the same with my food. I've made it easy for myself to hit my step target with most days. When I first wake up, I go outside for at least 20 minutes, if not half an hour, to get some steps in before I do anything else, because that really sets me up for the rest of the day anyway. But again, I've not set that as a thing that I have to do, because I'm also balancing that with my work requirements, my rest requirements. But that's something that when I wake up, the majority of the time I'm going and doing. It also gets 3,000 to 4,000 steps done super early doors, so that I'm not playing catch up later on in the day. These are things that are going to make it so much easier if you're thinking how you might implement a fat loss phase. The same with my food. I have mapped out a rough schedule of what I'm eating. I have similar meals I eat on repeat that I'm just changing, whether it's the protein source, whether it's the carbohydrate source, the vegetables I'm using. So a lot of the evenings last week, I had a very similar tea. It was chicken, some form of potato, squash, sweet potato, and some form of vegetable, with either a little bit of butter or olive oil to kind of mash it up, salt and pepper. And you might think that's really boring. It's really fucking tasty, and it's easy and it's repeatable, and I'm not getting bored of it. So I'm just doing the things and making it as easy as possible for me to stick to the things I need to do. I'm going to start by saying I haven't felt deprived in any way this week. I have had no craving, no want for anything that I haven't chosen to eat. And really interestingly, the majority of, I've had pre-workout snack where it's been like a squares bar, or I've had a little bit of Biscoff spread on like a yogurt pot. That is the extent of something like super sweet or like processed sugar vibes all week. And I haven't actually given it a second thought. And now that I'm saying it, that's a really weird thing for me, because I really haven't been aware of it. And this also goes to the mindset that's really helpful to be in. But we're going to come back to that shortly. Next thing on the list is energy levels. I have felt pretty good all week. Towards the back end of the week, I felt them dip slightly, but I'm also I've got my period due in like 3 days, so my body's preparing for that. And I also did quite an intense running session on Friday, so that's also going to have an impact. So my energy levels is something I'm wanting to monitor, and the impact that has on my training and training performance. Now, I did that running session. It was hard, and I don't know if I was better fueled with like the carbohydrates I was having previously, whether it would have felt a bit easier. But time will tell. But I did that, managed that, and I still did 4 sets of 5 reps heavy deadlifts as well, I think the day before that. So things haven't been impacted to any great extent so far, in terms of, and I've not been super sore or noticed other impacts of kind of not being as recovered, etc., and well fueled. And one of the reasons for that is I have structured how I eat and when I train to have sufficient carbohydrates in and around that. So if you have been following me and you have seen on Instagram, this has been the breakfast I've been having a lot. So it's cottage cheese on 2 thin slices of sourdough, and most of the days I have it with some kind of like fermented veg on it, because pickled vibe is just the thing. And if you are wanting fat loss and you like the pickly thing, it will satiate you like nothing else. Or pre-running, I had cottage cheese, honey and banana, which was incredible as well. So I've been having that, and then like just before my workout, I've still been having a pre-workout snacks, whether that's been a banana or a squares bar, to give me a bit more oomph. And from a psychological perspective, and that's the squares bars is, like I said, that's the only really sort of processed sugar I've been having. And it's like a little sweet thing before a workout, so great. So I think I've managed that well with how I'm fueling. I've then been having there's a local company that does meal prep, so my lunches throughout the week have been one of those, because they're like between 400 and 500 calories, and it's quick, easy, don't have to think about it. And at that point, I'm often really hungry and I'm really ready for it. And they're not huge portions for those calories, but it is sufficient. And then sometimes I might have a piece of fruit after it or mid-afternoon. But when I'm busy, I just don't think about it. I've not really noticed. And then I'm actually then ready for my evening meal. So from that, and this is the point that I keep making, when you make good choices with the food you're eating, if you fuel yourself well in terms of quantity, in terms of enough fibre, in terms of good quality protein sources, one, you're hungry and you're ready for whatever you're going to feed yourself. You actually enjoy that more, and it keeps you full and satiated. And then I've been snacking of an evening on fruit and yogurt, making a bit of like a yogurt pot if I want it. And it has just been rinse and repeat every day, very similar, but just with slight variations. And that's one of the easiest things you can do, because you're not having to constantly think and take up all this brain space of recipes and meals and ingredients, and you can just know what you're having and just make little tweaks so that the flavour combinations are a bit different. You're getting a bit different variety of veg and fibre in there. But I'll tell you one thing, going back to the not really having any sugar or craving for any sugar, in terms of, because fruit is obviously sugar, but things like fruit then taste so good. And so I'd really recommend that, not like cutting out sugar, but if you focus on all the other things, then your cravings definitely change. That being said, I did go into a local coffee shop. Just have a sip of my brew. A local coffee shop one day this week, and they do the best cine buns. They're huge and they're so good. And I was looking at it, I was like, wow. And this is the thing, right? I could have had one. I could have had half. I could have made it work. I'm not on ridiculously low calories by any means. I could have made it work if I wanted to. But as I was stood there, I was like, I'm not actually that bothered, because the mindset shift for me now, where I am compared to where I used to be, where I used to feel restricted and deprived of things and like I'd never be able to eat any of those things, the mindset I have now is like, it's a choice. I'm choosing not to have it because it's kind of always going to be there at some point. And over the next, 4.5, 5 weeks, there might be a time when I want it and I do that and I factor it in. But even if it's after that, there's always an opportunity for me to have something that I want to. But it's a choice that I'm making for what's going to serve me in the best way, because I don't want to introduce something into my day of eating that's then going to set off a want for more or make it harder for me to stick to the things that I'm trying to do. So absolutely, you can have things like that in your diet. And I think if you're looking at a longer term phase of fat loss, then that's necessary, and we have to think of how we integrate certain things like that into our diet. But when it's more short term and you can be really focused, it's also okay to say no to things. There's an element of that's what you have to do. You have to do something different for a different outcome. I've really noticed it's more about how I feel about myself and food and the process, and the feeling that I am actually very full, satisfied, well fueled. I'm feeling good, so I don't feel like something like that's going to add to anything. Whereas previously, when I was, when we talk about, like, say, 12 years ago, all I could think about was food and the things that I couldn't have or wasn't allowed to have. Very, very different mindset. So that's why you've also got to be in a good place going into fat loss, where you feel positive about the choices that you're making and about the food that you eat. I love the food that I eat. And that's why as well, I encourage clients, and when we first start working together, that we establish this baseline of what your current diet is, try and standardize that as much as possible, and then optimize it from there, so that you're not just doing the things that you feel you have to, or that you can't eat things that you want. It's structuring a diet that works, but it's still going to get you the result. So the valuable learnings and things you can take away: big, filling, tasty meals, high volume food, variety of vegetables, good carbohydrate sources, things like potatoes, squashes. They're so voluminous, so filling, and when it's cold in this time of year, absolutely dreamy. Making meals that are simple and repeatable, that you're not then thinking about. If something works, just keep going with it. You can add variety in later. In your maintenance phases, you can be more creative and experimental with foods and, that kind of thing. When you're doing something short term, just make it as simple as possible for yourself. Pickles. Adding pickles and any sort of flavouring like that, or just even changing up the spices that you use or the herbs that you use can really make a difference. But pickling, I find is really, it gives a different level of satiation, and it's not just any old pickle. I'm using fermented things because gut health and the benefit of that with endometriosis, reducing inflammation, etc., etc. So that's something to try if you are of the pickling vibe. If you're not, we can't be friends. I don't save calories for the evening. I generally have a slightly higher allowance for the evening meal to give a little bit more flexibility if needed. But my first and foremost thing is making sure my training is fueled well around. I've got my lunch kind of factored in, and then that's how I'm doing it. Saving calories just creates more pressure and feeling of low energy earlier in the day, and can just make you feel like shit. I indirectly did that one day, wasn't intentional at all, but it got to the evening, I had so many calories, but then I couldn't eat them really, and you just don't feel good for it. It's not a good cycle to get into. So training first and foremost. If you do want to factor in a bit of a sweet treat, great, do that, but focus on just filling meals. You won't be hungry if you create filling meals. And another learning actually is getting used to the feeling of hunger. We live in a society now where you're not far at all from food. Food in effect is all around us. And as soon as we feel any element of hunger, or we think we're hungry, or we think, oh, it's lunchtime, that's then the time to eat. And actually, when you've got to be a bit more careful around that as to meal timings, making sure that you're not going too long without eating, but also that things are well spread. I've definitely noticed different hunger feelings, but in a positive way, that then I'm really ready for my food and I really enjoy my food. So that's something to think about. Now, this week incoming, like I said, due on my period in 3 days-ish. Now, what's interesting is, because I lost my period the last time I did this, 12 years ago, it's a sensitive thing for me, because actually when I did that, I lost it very early on in the process, even when my calories were still pretty high. So it's something that's on my mind. I know that my weight can often go up 2 to 3 kilos around that time, so that's something I'm going to be mindful of. I know that body image is likely to be a lot poorer around that time, so again, I'm just aware of that. I'm not going to be focusing on that. I'm just kind of going to go through the week, look at things objectively, prioritize the good food again, keep up with the fermented foods. I'm going to have a little bit more red meat the start of the week now as well, and just a few more different things that are going to help support that phase of my cycle as best as possible. Normally I would be starting with some kind of cravings at this sort of point, and I've not had anything yet, and I'm just intrigued to see. I might be absolutely fine. So it's more of just a wait and see what can happen. But I've got things there if I know I need to pull on them. I've already pre-warned my coach at this time, and then the impact that could have on my energy combined with the deficit and my performance in sessions. So I'm also not expecting massive things from myself, especially the first half of this week. That is usually when my energy dips and my strength output kind of focus for my session dips. So I still do it, but I just don't have as high expectation for the session, and that's okay. So let's see how it goes. But so far so good, and I'm feeling really good. I'm just excited for the next 4.5, 5 weeks. If any of this has been useful, or you want to talk over it in a bit more detail, or how it might apply to you, drop me a comment below, or find me on Instagram, send me a message on there. Love to have a chat and help. And I'll see you in the next video.